Good evening, everyone. I'm Carly Ziter, an ecology professor at Concordia University. We just heard a little bit about roads, a little bit about housing. I too study urban infrastructure, but maybe not the kind you think of when you imagine a new city. The urban infrastructure I study isn't cutting edge or high tech or wireless. It's old and low tech and rooted firmly in place. You see, I study trees, also flowers, occasionally birds, bees. And the reason I care so much about this living urban infrastructure is that with over 70% of Canadians living in large cities, it forms the main contact with nature for so many of us. Some of you might not have expected to hear about nature tonight until Graham gave me away. So nature is what we find in Algonquin Park. Nature is what we find on tropical vacations for those of us lucky enough to have experienced one. And in comparison, it's really easy to dismiss that maple tree on the corner or the bumblebee in your vegetable garden as utterly ordinary. But when my students and my colleagues study that ordinary nature, when we measure your backyard trees and install temperature sensors in your parks and catch the bees and butterflies to learn what they need to thrive, our science tells us that those urban forests are protecting us from deadly heat waves, including the 50% of trees that grow on private property, your trees, if you're lucky enough to steward one. The community gardens supporting those bees not only provide us with healthy food, but improve our mood, our memories, our connection to communities. Those of us who study it learn time and time again that this ordinary neighborhood nature yields extraordinary benefits. And if we're not careful, if we're not deliberate about the way we build our cities, we stand to lose that. We make a lot of big promises. We're going to increase urban biodiversity. We're going to plant trees. We're always going to plant so many trees. We're going to improve access to green space, access for everyone. But actions speak louder than words. When we look at those beautiful designs of new developments, they always seem to show happy people walking among the trees and the flowers. But when budgets get tight, often those trees and flowers seem to be the first thing to go. And when we need a new transit hub or a warehouse, we're awfully quick to downgrade or to dismiss the value of that woodland or wetland, especially if it's in a poor neighborhood. And I don't blame any single person or profession for this. It's just that somehow we've let urban nature become a nice to have and not a must have. It's become okay for this living infrastructure to fail, to be lost in a way that we wouldn't accept for other elements of our city. So how do we elevate nature in our cities? This is the part where I give you a quick fix, right? Like 3 steps for urban nature, where I tell you to install a beehive on your roof to save the bees and get some good PR in the process. But the thing is, these quick fixes that aren't grounded in evidence, in research, can sometimes contribute to the problem. Those really popular rooftop beehives are full of non-native livestock species that our research shows may actually be harming and not helping our hundreds of wild bee species in our Canadian cities. Would you get a backyard chicken coop to save the endangered birds? I give this example not to shame, but to emphasize that a transition to a greener, a more biodiverse city won't come without effort, without learning new ways of doing things. And when we relegate nature to a nice to have, to an aesthetic add-on, we negate the skills and expertise needed to make this ecological transition. So how do we elevate nature in our cities? When we make decisions about the cities of the future, we need to ensure that trained ecologists, biologists, farmers have a place at the table with the engineers and planners and politicians. We need knowledge and funding and follow-through. And for those of us who aren't at that decision-making table, I'd really implore you to be supportive of a little short-term sacrifice. Making more space for nature means accepting less space for cars and parking lots. It means letting go of neat, manicured lawns full of species we've brought from elsewhere and embracing messier spaces filled with native plants that maybe look a little wild. And it means sharing our spaces, getting together with our neighbors, and ensuring our city officials know that our few remaining green spaces aren't just empty spaces waiting for buildings. They're spaces that are already full of life and opportunity for connection. It means putting that local democracy we just heard about to work. And it means that we can't only plant new trees. We need to stop cutting down the old ones too, even if they're in a spot that's a little inconvenient. A new city requires a new perspective on nature where we value it highly as the critical infrastructure that it is. And growing that new, greener city won't be easy, but I think it will be worth it. And I think we owe it to future generations to try. I asked my brilliant grad students the other day what they would say if given 7 minutes to defend what we study in our lab. Why I send them out to measure backyard trees and catch bees in the park and install temperature sensors all around town. They gave really great answers that I stole and included in this speech to you, but I'll share one that really resonated with me. The one that I used in my introduction. My student Bella said, "Tell them their kids will experience nature first in a city." Most children born this generation, not just here in Toronto, not just in Canada, but across the globe, will primarily experience nature, will form their core relationships with our beautiful, spectacular planet in a city. And the good news is, by raising your voice for urban nature today, we have so much potential to make sure that that relationship is a good one. Thank you all for your time.